Welcome to the JOMA Preventative Health Podcast, hosted by the Jewish Orthodox Women's Medical Association. We provide you with up-to-date information on health topics geared towards the Orthodox Jewish community. This podcast content is provided for informational purposes only and is not intended as medical advice or as a substitute for the medical advice of a physician.
Welcome to the Jewish Orthodox Women's Medical Association, or JOMA podcast. I'm your host, Lisa Minkin. I'm a general pediatrician and a proud JOMA member. And I'm really honored and really excited to be interviewing for the second time Chana Radcliffe. Before I introduce someone who really should need no introduction, because she's really has a long and illustrious career as a child psychologist and is well known to many, I do want to just say a few words. I've been doing this with my later podcasts. I've been announcing that please, if you know of a topic, particularly if you are passionate about a topic and you want to be interviewed, please reach out to us at health, HEALTH, at joma.org. And actually, Chana Radcliffe reached out to me to do this second interview with me. So that was a double honor for me. We are going to be talking today about two of her books. She has a new book out, No More Tics, which is specifically about an alternative remedy, a form of Bach flower remedy for tic disorders. And we are also going to be talking at greater length, actually, about childhood anxiety and her older book from 2013, The Fear Fix. I am doing more talks about or addressing some alternative approaches. I always do it from a Western medicine bias or background. I joke I'm a Western medicine kind of gal, and I'm representing the Jewish Orthodox Women's Medical Association. So I take that seriously. It does not mean that I'm not curious about or respectful about alternative approaches. I do believe that they should be integrated when used into mainstream medicine and not separate from it. Again, this podcast does not constitute medical advice. I'm sure it says that somewhere in the intro. I'm going to just reiterate that. And comments and criticisms and questions are welcome, again, to be emailed at health@joma.org. Very interested in people's thoughts. So I'm going to introduce the speaker, the person I'm interviewing. It's Chana Radcliffe. She is a psychologist in private practice in Toronto, Canada, counseling parents, couples, and individuals. She's the author of the self-help book, No More Tics, which just came out, as well as the HarperCollins publications, Raise Your Kids Without Raising Your Voice, and The Fear Fix, and 7 other books on Jewish family life and emotional well-being, including her most recent parenting book, Better Behavior Now, which was the topic of our first podcast interview. Chana is a weekly columnist for the Family First section of the internationally distributed Mishpacha magazine. In conjunction with the Jewish workshops, she has produced numerous webinar classes on parenting, marriage, anxiety, and stress management, and she currently runs a live, ongoing weekly family life webinar series called The Family Circle. Chana provides daily tools for parenting, family life, and emotional well-being on her Facebook and Instagram parenting pages, as well as through her daily parenting posts email list. Thank you so much for doing this with me.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me. Thank you.
I really appreciate this. Is our second conversation. We did Better Behavior Now when that book came out. Yeah. And I know you reached out to me to discuss your latest book, which is No More Tics. And it's funny because I was talking to someone about your latest book and they said, oh yes, everyone's talking about The Fear Fix. And I'm thinking, no, that's not your latest book. That book was from 2013.
Yes, that's true.
And I think that people are talking about it now because there is so much more anxiety in childhood now.
And in adulthood.
Well, yes.
Very
and in parents,
now.
and it interacts the parents and the child. So I had to do both.
Okay, sure. It's great. Yeah.
So we're going to get to No More Tics, and we're kind of going to integrate it. It's an inside joke right now. the two books. So let's start with the subtitle of this book is Solutions for Every Child's Moments of Worry, Panic, and Fear. And so that really implies that children have a lot of anxiety that doesn't fit into the disorder level.
So do we.
Yes,
I
and
mean,
parents.
yes, right. So it becomes a disorder only when it disrupts the child's functioning in some significant way, socially, academically, maybe even physically, or the child is extremely distressed by the amount of fear. It's the same definition for us grown-ups. So we all feel anxious, we all feel sad, we all feel angry. We have the range of human emotions. It's just too bad that we use the word depressed, let's say, or anxious to refer both to a clinical disorder and to a mood that everybody has or feeling that everybody has. Yeah, so we all children have fear, and we want to be there to help them negotiate that.
Right. And I love preventative medicine.
Yes.
So I feel like your book is very preventative because instead of waiting for it to become more severe and meet disorder criteria to get help, right? It's how you approach it that can make all the difference. And I'm going to say right from the start, we are not here to provide medical advice. Please consult with your child's pediatrician or mental health practitioner or both. But I'm blown away by this book. I sort of think of it as the Dr. Spock for mental health in children.
I'm glad. Yeah, that's what I was trying to do. It's got a lot. Sometimes people say maybe too much even information and techniques and practical strategies. But
but you can look up, find what your child is dealing with specifically, and work on that. So
exactly. You don't have to read the whole book, exactly.
Let's talk a little bit about, you keep saying parents, have anxiety too. And of course, anxiety, even the disorder, is very genetic. But even if you don't have a genetic predisposition to anxiety, when your child worries, you're going to worry, right? How your child feels reflects to you.
Not necessarily.
No?
And in fact, no, this book actually will help the parents do better with their own process as well, because it's not really, we don't need to worry about our child's emotions. Let's keep in mind there's 5 categories of emotions. There's happy ones, sad, mad, scared, and confused. Okay, so happy is one of 5 main categories. So how often is a kid in that category? And we don't want as parents to be pulled down, dragged down, overwhelmed, or alarmed by these other emotions. That's the normal feelings that prompt action in our lives. We need to have these other feelings. So no, we don't really want the parent to be worried about the child's worry. We want the parent to know what to do about the child's worry. So.
Right. But what I meant was it is normal for parents to react to their child's negative emotions with their own negative emotions.
Yes.
It's normal.
Having said that, it's not ideal. It's perfectly normal. Yes.
It's perfectly normal. And what's great about your book is you go into great detail about that. And so I'd love for some little tips for what parents can say that's helpful and maybe should avoid saying and doing that's not so helpful when their child is having. And we're talking about normal anxiety right now.
Yeah. I mean, I know that you actually spoke about children's anxiety in another podcast, and the person who spoke there very nicely said it, that reassurance is not the thing. It's the instinctive thing that we want to do. We want to tell a child who says, I've got a headache, maybe I'm really sick, and the parent wants to say, it's nothing, you didn't sleep last night, or the kid says, I've got a big test, I don't know how I'm going to do on it. This A+ student is obviously going to get an A+ like she always does. And the parent says, well, you always do well, sweetheart. And we lovingly say these things, but we don't realize that it's very not only unhelpful for the anxious process, but it even reinforces it. We don't want to do any harm to our child, and we're not trying to, but when we provide that reassurance, we're rewarding. It's almost as if you gave the kid $100 bill for saying that statement. It's like, really, here's $100, go buy yourself a treat, and that's how the brain takes it when we offer reassurance.
Right, so why?
It's rewarding. It's calming to the system. Like, I was feeling uncomfortable. You just made me feel comfortable. You made me feel comfortable. Therefore, when I'm uncomfortable again, I'm going to come to you again, so you can make me feel comfortable again. So this deprives the child of the opportunity to find a neural pathway where she can make herself feel comfortable and avoid that whole cycle of, I need you to make this bad feeling go away. Now, co-regulation is a wonderful, healthy thing, but we're talking about an anxiety process, which is not a wonderful, healthy thing. So it's not helpful for the parent to provide the comfort, but it's helpful for the parent to be present and help the child provide the comfort while the parent is present. So the co-regulating part of that is that the parent is not freaking out. The parent is just there for the conversation, and the child's body will use neuroception to get the parent's good energy around this, so that the child is being helped just by the parent standing there and listening to this. And the kid is saying, I'm going to fail. And the parent says, using, we'll call it the ventral vagal system, right? In that nice tone of voice, really, honey, you're worried about that? You're worried about failing this test, And that voice, that cadence, that presence, that is providing co-regulation, but it's not providing the answer of, don't worry, you'll always do well. We're not going that far, okay? So we're just kind of emotional coaching is what that's called. And and so the child says, well, I'm not so worried because I don't know, but I might not do well. So, right. Well, maybe, and then the child goes through the process in their own brain, like, well, whatever, I think I know most of it. So, oh, okay. All right. Well, good luck then, and so the child is beginning to work in her own brain to find a regulated place where she comes back to balance, because it's uncomfortable for her to be in that unbalanced, anxious state. So if you don't do the work, she will. And that builds that new self-calming wire in her brain, and she'll be able to do it with or without your presence.
Right. That's a great explanation. And going back to co-regulation, I think the necessary skill the parent has to have is to tolerate their own negative feelings, right? Because I think parents might say, oh, don't worry, because they want them to feel better right away, because they themselves can't tolerate the child's discomfort. And so back to other podcasts I've done, I did a podcast with Dr. Robin Kozlowitz, the post-traumatic parent, and we talked extensively about how parents can heal themselves so then they can co-regulate more effectively.
That sounds great. I'll have to go listen to that one.
Right. Because and I'm sorry, I didn't tell you before, but, especially, like I said, many parents have their own anxiety, like you said, even not just anxiety disorders that are genetic, but just plain anxiety, particularly, unfortunately, after the pandemic, it's just skyrocketed. Yes. We're still in America dealing with a ridiculous formula shortage. I mean, it's so anxiety provoking. And then a lot of parents were worried when they wanted to get their children the COVID vaccine, but they weren't able to get it because it wasn't approved for their age, or just all the talk on the media. It's a very anxiety. I'm telling you, as a pediatrician, anxiety in parents is rampant.
Yeah.
So it's hard to ask parents to do something that they themselves are not currently capable of doing. And I did address this in another podcast with therapist Devorah Levy. I think it was called Survive, Not Then Thrive, or something like that. I think we also have to give ourselves grace that, you may read something and it may be the ideal and you might not be there yet. It's something to work on. It's okay to be human.
Can I give a little parenting tip here that is in the book? It's meant to be teach it to children. But it's an understanding of how we build our anxious brain, how we can rebuild it. I have a lot of metaphors for this, but one of the ones I put in the book was the Amazon.com model of the brain, which I call it. Mm-hmm. So I say, let's say a child is having problems at school, or problems with friends, or problems of any kind. And as you said, the parent is going to be more worried. And then they get a call from the school, there's something happened, whatever it is, the child got into a fight, and then the parent is picturing this kid becoming a delinquent and being in jail, or whatever it is, all the worrisome thoughts that the parent might think. So the way we can rebuild the anxious brain is to look at it as if we're on an Amazon bookstore. So when you go to Amazon, you go to books, it says something like, hi, Alyssa, we've got some suggestions for you. And you see at the bottom of your page, there's 10 books. Now, Amazon has millions of books, okay? And they're only going to pick the 10 that you really will be interested in. It's a very good choice. How did they know? So they have a little bot that goes around and it looks at what you're searching for, what you click on, and what you purchase or put in your wish list, and it makes that list based on your interest, your activity, what you've shown to be interested in. Now, as far as what we can be thinking when we're washing the dishes or getting, putting our makeup on in the morning, making a bed, doing things that do not require 100% concentration. So, which is most of our day. So our brain is kind of always running in the background, looking for stimulation, creating stimulation. And it's as if there's a little voice in there that says, while you're washing the dishes, hey there, I know that you like to worry about your son's behavior at school. Would you like to, can I interest you in worrying about that right now? Now, if you click on that, yes, what's going to be with him? I just don't know. Like, nothing's working. You start like playing with that thought. You're expanding it, you're stretching it, you're attending to it. Then for sure, that thought will be suggested to you next time. But you see, we actually have, in terms of what we could be thinking, we'd have a choice of an infinity, literal infinity of thoughts while we're washing those dishes. We could be wondering about the sea algae or the stars or how leaves, do photosynthesis or whatever. There's an infinity of thoughts, but we only think about 10 ourselves. When we're 15, it's a certain group of 10, and when we're 25, it's another group of 10. Because when you stop clicking on a thought, like, no, actually, because if I think about that now, I'm going to feel sick and tired even before I'm finished the dishes. Okay, so I would rather think about how grateful I am that I have hot water and bubbles in my sink here. This is just such a miracle. This is really good, And we can move ourselves to thoughts that produce better chemistry, a happier mood, more health, because those gratitude thoughts, just for example, set your heart rate variability in the best place it can be, put you in the ventrovagal system, open up your intelligence, your intuition, your healthy cells, your good mood. I mean, we want to think about the bubbles, okay? But we have a very habitual, and it's habitual because we keep clicking on it, okay? If you stop clicking on it, our brain will start suggesting when we're washing the dishes and walking from point A to point B, hey, do you like that cloud? Have you noticed that? It's like, wow, God is such an artist. Like, you know what I mean? Like, and that's, your brain will start doing that for you. You can rewire what's going to happen in that brain.
That's what I'm thinking, listening to you. That is brilliant. And a similar analogy would be, unfortunately, how the media manipulates you.
Oh gosh.
It's even scarier than Amazon.
Yeah.
It's even scarier than Amazon, right? And that you hear about people who are becoming more polarized, or even who are becoming radicalized because they're constantly reading more and more and more of the same thing and reinforcing those same brain pathways. So those are great analogies that we do have control over which pathways.
Right. So when you have a child who's lying in bed at night ruminating, or when any of us are ruminating, just obsessing about a certain topic over and over and over, we just want to learn that we have some power to change that tendency, and as you said before, the earlier we get involved in that. So if a parent can teach that to a child while the kid is young, it can really be much easier than, tackling it later. But it's very possible at any age, at any stage, to rewire the brain.
Right. And I love the way you were showing us how, if you can tolerate your child's discomfort, you can actually help them get past it rather than to shut it down by reassuring. And I think that's the explanation, in no longer many words, about why it's bad. It's almost like a phobia, right? When you keep the child avoiding the thing they're afraid of. In the short run, everybody feels better.
Yeah. And there's a lot more that the child may need to do. Like, that's just the beginning. If that solves the problem, then we're done. Okay. But there are many other techniques in the book. That's like, I think, the first chapter. And then there's like, so the reason for that is because there are sometimes things we have to do beyond that, certain kinds of cognitive reframing, very specific, as you see in the book, or certain kinds of tools for releasing after you've done all the problem solving. If there's still anxiety, there's still more tools offered for releasing that feeling from the body and the mind. And a lot of it is stuck in physiology. Like, it's not our fault, but between the chemistry and the neurology of the whole thing, it's not just cognitive, and we may want to come in on different levels to help our body holistically. So there's a lot of different things we might want to do, practical ways that we can help a child.
Right. Oh, the book is chock full of them. It's really incredible. I think it's amazing. And no wonder people are talking about it like it's just came out 9 years ago.
Yeah.
Let's see. You briefly alluded to emotional coaching. I think you talked actually more than brief, but you just labeled it briefly. Can you define and go a little more in depth into that, please?
Okay. Well, this is focusing on the feeling rather than on the literal content of what the child says. That's why I said, like, when the kid says, I don't know how I'm going to fail this test. And the parent is not just repeating the words back, though that wouldn't be terrible. But before doing that, the parent is asking herself, what is this child feeling right now? And putting the name of that feeling out. If you can build a feeling vocabulary for the child, they have more ability, again, to regulate themselves later. And the reason for that is that the right word is like a key that opens the cage in which the feeling is trapped, and it lets that feeling fly out. So if you hit that, the more you use a wide variety of words, the more precise and accurate the word. Like, it's not depressed. No, it's more like I'm, I don't know, I feel depleted. Depleted. And then the whole thing, like, if you hit the right word, right? So you want to build words by using words in your house, and helping the child. So the parent says here, what is the kid feeling about the test? Well, she's feeling worried. Now, this is not a hard word or a rare word. It's a common word, but still a emotional word that will help. So, were you worried about that, honey? So we're going right for the feeling. That's what emotion coaching is, or emotional coaching, whatever you call it. So we're naming the emotion. And the child is then checking that inside. Am I worried? Well, not so much. I mean, I'm probably do okay, as she checks it, so you're helping the child to reflect on that. So what is it then? It's like, I'm not going to do well. So, oh, you're afraid you're not going to do well. So from the parent's point of view, it's asking yourself, what is she feeling when she says that? You can look at her face, her tone of voice, her words, and put it all together and make a guess. If you're wrong, the kid will say, no, it's not that. I'm blah, blah, blah instead. You say, oh, you're blah, blah, blah instead. Now, the big trick here is not to use the word but after you finished naming the feeling. The kid says, I don't want to sleep in the dark. Oh, you don't like the dark, honey. You're scared of it. Yeah, I hate the dark. I don't want to sleep in the dark. Okay, honey, but there's nothing in the dark. Then we want to go on to the reassurance, right? So when you use the word but, it's like an eraser, which means, but I don't care about all that. Like, what really the point is here is, let me reassure you, So we want to do the name of the feeling, period, pause. Just stop for a second, okay? Your next thought should be, what can we do to help you be more comfortable, okay? So in other words, you've got a problem. You don't want to be in the dark. So, and I don't know, maybe that's not the best example here, because maybe that's easily solved by, should we put a light on? Should we put a little dimmer light? That. So should we put a little dimmer light on, honey? Would that help? And the kid might say yes. Or maybe it was that the child doesn't want to sleep alone. That's a better one, because it's more complex. Okay, for an example, right? So, I don't want to sleep in my room alone. It's I'm scared. Oh, I know, honey, you're scared. And we're not going to go, but, we have an alarm system on, or mommy and dad are just down the hall and your brother and sister right beside you. Like, there's nothing to be scared of. We're not going to do that. We're just going to, oh, you're scared. So let's think of things that we can do to make you feel more comfortable so you can sleep in your room. Okay. Would you like a little dimmer light or something? No, that's not going to help. I don't want to be in the room by myself. It's like, oh, it's really that you feel like you need somebody there. Yeah, I get it. Now, let's say this kid is 12 and we've been working on this for a few years. And I have actually come across 12-year-olds who've had that problem, because their parents are sympathetic to their feelings. And we have kind of like an error going on, a large error going on, that everything is about making the child feel good. That's that's not it. We want to help the child be resilient and healthy and happy and independent and functional. And these things are important in the end to making the child feel good. So anyways, let's say there's this 12-year-old who's being allowed to sleep in her parents' room, and finally they got sick of it. Okay, this can happen. So so we're going to say, well, honey, I know you're uncomfortable. I hear you saying the light isn't good enough. So let's think of something else we can do. Maybe it's because of what you're thinking when you're lying in bed there. Like, I'm wondering if you're, listening for noises and all these things and kind of conjuring up, scary ideas in your brain. It's not in my brain, there's monsters outside, or somebody could kidnap me, or somebody could break through the window. I read that on the news. I heard it, Oh, right. There are scary things that happen. That's true. Okay. So, and they might happen. So you could think about that, but then you're going to have trouble falling asleep and you're going to feel pretty uncomfortable. You could think about some other things. I can't think of anything else. When I hear the noise downstairs, I know there's a robber in the house. Oh, okay, well, I understand. Listen, you can lie in bed, be awake all night and think about the robbers and everything if you like. I'm going to bed now, you're going to bed now. But, or if you want, you can practice thinking about some other things. Now, you'll see in the book, we have a bunch of different techniques for what to think about. But for example, especially for a younger kid here, but even for an older kid or an adult, we might want to bring in images of safety and protection into the room. Why don't you just pretend, honey, that there's a guard at the door, like picture a bunch of soldiers in your room, or a bunch of angels, or a bunch of, the parent may have to have some imagination too, or read some books. But this magic imagery is surprisingly powerful, especially when we have young children. We can tell them stories using imagery of, magical tools. It empowers the psyche. It's a little bit irrational or illogical because, of course, we don't have the magic guards there. Why don't you imagine there's a big, friendly lion sleeping right by your bed, and see how that feels. It can feel pretty good, actually. I am prone in my system to a little bit of anxiety myself, which, using all the techniques in the book, I have really conquered. Okay, but there was a time when I was working alone in a place that was kind of deserted, where my office was. It was alone. It was deserted. It was abandoned. I used to have creepy feelings there, and I used that. Whenever I moved around in that building, I would take my imaginary lions with me, and I felt fine. It was a long time ago, but it worked fine at the time. So even for adults, right? But certainly for children, these kinds of things can help.
Yeah, I think these are such amazing tips, but I have a couple thoughts. Thought number one is, I'm always on the parents' side too. Not everybody is able to do this, not just on a specific occasion, but maybe they won't be able to do it well enough. And there's nothing wrong with getting help, whether it's help for you, help for your child, help for both of you. I'm a big fan, and we talked about it in the interview with Dr. Michelle Conti about childhood anxiety, about family therapy and parents getting help at the same time their children get help, so they can learn those tools. There's nothing wrong with, I don't want to say outsourcing, but it doesn't have to be a do-it-yourself. There should be no shame in that.
Absolutely. The thing is, I think that there's so many techniques in this one book, The Fear Fix, that most parents were going to find something there that they can actually do with a child whose anxiety is not disordered.
Right.
Okay. But for example, let's say that the parent does not have any imagination, although the chapter tells you how to do it, right? But would rather use what we call in the book an outside helper, like rescue remedy. Now, rescue remedy is a little, Bach flower remedy, BACH. Available here where I live in the drugstores and the pharmacies. It's also available in every health food store. It's on Amazon. It's a little thing that a lot of people know about, rescue remedy. And it's a water-based, I'm going to call it a magical potion. Okay. It's made from a mixture. It's water. It's actually, on the physical level, it's water. Okay. We can talk more about Bach flowers in a minute, but having that in the medicine cabinet when the child is worrying about the monsters under the bed, or the test, or the dental appointment coming up, the surgery, the flight, whatever, okay? 4 drops of that, a little bit of water, is something that every parent can try before we go to therapy, okay? Because that often, not always, but often clears up the anxiety. So the anxious feeling. And many adults, that's a very popular remedy that billions of people around the world are using, because it doesn't have the downside of Ativan. It is child-friendly, it is harmless, and it usually helps. So it's an amazing little thing. I had one client come to me from Egypt. He said he was looking for a practitioner in Canada who knew about rescue remedy, because it was the thing that saved his life. He was a very anxious man. He was already in his 60s, but in Egypt, everybody uses rescue remedy. But in North America, he was having trouble locating a therapist. It was interesting. It is used all over the world, and such an easy solution that doesn't require any brilliance on the parents' part. It's just like taking Tylenol, except it's less harmful than Tylenol. Nothing could go wrong with rescue remedy. It's like water to the system.
Right. I find this fascinating, the whole, part of your book where you talk about outside helpers. And, not everybody is going to want to do that. There's people, I keep joking that I'm a Western medicine kind of girl. And I don't know that, as my sister would say, that resonates with me personally. But I think that, a lot of people do use it. And it's funny because I think a lot of people do use so-called Western medicine, which really isn't always so efficacious the same way, right? Like children's cold medication.
Western medicine is, I mean, we're talking about normal kids for the most part for this book, although this will work with people with anxiety disorders as well. But this is more like making yourself a cup of chamomile tea, but it's more effective. And even if you're a Western medicine girl, you might have a cup of chamomile tea just because you like the flavor of it, or you find it a little bit calming to your system. I'm not sure. Some people have said, oh, I don't want him to become addicted to the rescue remedy. And the nice thing about rescue remedy, just as an example of Bach flowers, is it has no addictive value whatsoever. It's very hard to register the effect of it. It does not release endorphins. No dopamine is coming, nothing good. You have no elated feeling. It doesn't hit those centers of the brain that would cause addiction. What it does is it provides relief. It's like it untangles a little knot and it restores you only to your normal. So your normal is just like whatever it is. I mean, usually people say, I don't think it was the rescue remedy or the Bach flower thing. I think I just realized that there's just nothing to worry about. That's how it feels. And every time I take rescue remedy, there's nothing to worry about. But we don't take rescue remedy on tap. There's no payoff for it in the body. It's just like we only take it to stop a jittery thing. I don't know. There is no danger of ever becoming addicted to it. So anyways, it's not even like Tylenol, where you can get addicted to that. But yeah.
Right. No, there wouldn't be any medical dependence, but what about a psychological dependence?
Not at all.
Just like that child who needs to sleep with their parents because they haven't learned their, inner resources.
Psychological dependence, you'll see even in the book that I recommend things, possible comforts like crystals of the right kind. For example, for a kid who's got a very alert mind at night, there's a stone. What is it? It's white and black and howlite, Howlite. A good stone to sleep with, okay, let's say in the worst case, we taught a kid, or we had a little lavender oil pillow, like a little pillow stuffed with lavender herbs stuck under his pillow.
I have to make one little caveat here about lavender, is that lavender, you have to be very careful. And with any, alternative remedies, I do recommend you speak to your child's.
So do I. I say, I don't recommend these things.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Lavender can be associated with precocious puberty. We're finding that. So anyway, I wouldn't recommend sleeping on a lavender pillow.
Okay, not on a lavender pillow, but I'm saying there's such a thing as a little sleep pillow, which they put little herbs like. But I do, when I say herbs, I always send the person to a herbalist to discuss the age of the child, the amount of the herb and everything. I'm not a herbalist. Okay, so I agree with you there. But what I'm saying is, let's say in the worst case that the child became addicted to his stone that he sleeps with.
Dependent. Let's say dependent, right? It's the word should be, yeah.
Yeah. So we can use things to help our system calm down. And as long as they're harmless, they're not harmful to the body, the psyche, whatever. So the kid has his stone. It's better than staying awake all night, I would say.
For sure.
But the other alternative was there's a lot of techniques in the book you'll see that are psychological. So we're going to use our brain. But the outside comforts, whether that's a stuffed animal or your magic stone or whatever it is, I don't see any harm in them unless, in the worst case, it's like those kids who drag around a comfort toy for a bit too long. But again, we don't see this. I'm sure you've never come across a parent complaining that the kid had a, comfort stone or whatever. And, it's just not a problem. I don't think we have to make it a problem. It's, we're imagining something that doesn't exist.
Right. Or you could say, to the child, I know this helps you, but we're going to also learn things that you can have from within you that you can never lose. You don't have to worry, did I run out of my remedy?
That's why there's a million techniques in the book.
Right.
And I don't like having one thing. I don't like having just rescue or just a stone or just a cognitive strategy. Because even the cognitive strategies, when anxiety has gone too far already in the system, you can't access them. They won't work for you. Okay.
Right.
A breathing technique, we like breathing techniques, which the book has several, because your breath is always with you. But you have to install that breath through practice on a regular basis so the neural pathway can run when you're anxious. Otherwise, forget it. You can't just pull that out of a hat. There's a lot of instructions for all these things, but I'm with you. We need a menu of things to turn to. And when we have that menu, it's going to be good to go. Like, life is rough. And there are lots of things to really be scared about, concerned about, worried about, afraid of. Okay, that's just, there are things like that. And yet we have to negotiate these things. So we want to do so with the bringing the most that we can to the table, that we want our prefrontal cortex to stay online. We don't want to dissolve into a panic attack, screaming and foaming at the mouth on the floor. We want to be there on the airplane, even if it's shaking. We don't want to have a heart attack or fall to pieces, or, we want to be able to handle the fact that there's turbulence and we don't like it. So there's a variety of skills that work on the body, in the mind, and we're going to use all of that. There's the tapping things. I don't know if you noticed that, where knowing where to tap on the body. It's kind of a cross between an outside helper and a cognitive technique. It uses cognition and the body at the same time for a very, very powerful, extremely powerful anti-reduction effect. And there's instructions in the book on how to use that.
I love this. I love the whole concept of the outside helpers. I love how you say for the emotional rescue, the parent should carry it and use it on themselves as well.
Use it first before tending to the kids.
Yes, it's like putting in your oxygen mask first on the plane, back to the turbulence on the plane.
Yes.
I want to bring up one more thing that I was thinking about earlier. Is there is a new book by Dr. Mona Delahook called Brain Body Parenting. And I'm still reading it. But one idea that she has in it that I love is that it's normal for parents to misread their child's cues. That talk about like a newborn, the baby will cry. Is the baby wet? Is the baby hungry? Is the baby overstimulated? And it's okay to figure it out. So she takes that same analogy to parenting. You're not always going to be able to say the right thing, and that's okay, because I feel like one of the problems with parenting books, with trying so hard, is that you feel like you have to have stapled to your refrigerator, like say this, do this, don't say this. And it just, I feel like it can be, anxiety provoking for the parent. I have to be like the perfect parent. There is no perfect parent. There's good enough.
And discouraging. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I think it's okay, to not hit it the right time, get it the first time. That's okay. And you can also say to, your child, mom's human too, right? Like, I didn't get that. That's okay. We're going to try it again.
Absolutely. Yeah.
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 And also to seek help, because some people will be able to do this. And it may be a point in time when you were just not able to do that co-regulation because of your own issues. That's okay to get help.
It's okay to get help. I'm thinking as you say this, that there seems to be a shortage of help available right now. Are you finding that where you are?
That is a tremendous problem. And that's why it is so wonderful to have, all the ideas in this book. But even with these ideas, especially for children who are parents and children who are struggling with actual disorders, they will need more, regardless of how available it is.
Yeah.
And I will say to all the pediatricians listening to me, because I have some, I'm begging you to join the professionals that can handle mental health problems in children. There is a program called, in New York, it's called Project Teach, but they have this similar program in other states where they will do a free, relatively short course for physicians and other healthcare professionals on the basics of medication and referrals. And you can call them up during the week and get free curbside, consults. I'm actually going to be interviewing the person who started this project. It's called Reach, the Reach Institute.
Fantastic.
Yeah. So I'm going to be interviewing him. I'm blanking out on his whole name. But I'm going to be interviewing him on this, and we're going to be talking about how they started this program to empower more healthcare professionals to fill that void, because it can't be that you have this problem and you can't find help. That's not okay.
I know. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I do try. Like I have webinars on this material also. For example, I did them through something called Jewish Workshops, but you can find them on my Daily Parenting Post shopping page. So there's an anxiety webinar for those people, which has a lot of these techniques explained, so that I'm so aware of the difficulty of getting the help. So I try to put it out in a million different ways.
And it's also empowering, though. That was something else that really I loved about your book, that on the one hand, there should be no shame in getting help, and you should be able to find good help. But on the flip side, not everybody, you don't need a professional for everything.
Right.
Yeah. And if you can get in there early and get those brain, neurons firing in the right direction earlier, you might prevent needing a professional at all, which is why this is amazing.
It's interesting because I think that a lot of people don't think about their children's anxiety until it's over the top, whereas it should be something that every parent knows right from the beginning of life, because we're anxious right from the beginning of life about, you could say we're concerned or we're worried or we're afraid, whatever, we have these feelings. The parents are intervening all the time. So it should be like mandatory knowledge, like, well, you're going to be intervening, so don't you want to know how to do it, in a helpful way, the way that can help the kid the most.
Right. And to value our mental health the same way we value our physical health. Somehow it's being treated as less.
Well, ultimately it comes down to the same thing. I mean, because our mental health, chronic low mood or chronic high anxiety is really bad for our physical health.
Of course.
Yeah, it's the same thing. And we're a mind-body thing. So
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I promised that I would get to the book No More Tics. And so I feel like this is a good turning point for that. So tell me a little bit about that book, please.
I'm thinking that you're saying, like, speaking of mind body.
Speaking of mind body, well, there is a very strong mind body connection in a wide range of tic disorders. And, you do have a description in the book of the many different categories. It's not just unitary.
There's different ways to get tics. Let's first define that, because a lot of people don't know what they're looking at when they see their child beginning to have blinking, excessive blinking or head nodding or making a little sound with their mouth or a little cough, but endlessly, that the doctor says is not up, some kind of bronchial thing. So parents might think of this as a nervous habit or something, but tics are usually kind of annoying either to hear or to see. So the parents might just tell the kids, stop it. So we stop doing that, please. Not realizing that it's thought to be more of a neurological issue at this time. And for the, call it normal tics, they start when a child is somewhere between 4 and 8 years old, average of 6 or 7. It's very common to get these tics. They may last a little while and then just disappear, never to be seen again. It used to be called a transient tic disorder. Now I think it's called it means the same thing, whatever.
Right, same idea.
Yeah. And then there's the tics, and they say actually that what they thought was transient is probably not transient, because anybody who has a tic usually does end up having it off and on throughout their life. So it's just that it looked like it went away for a while, but and so I don't know what percentage actually do just disappear by themselves, but many children will have them, because the definition of that originally was for 1 year or less. And then whatever, we see kids who have it 2, 3, 4, 5 years, they're 12 years old, they're 14 years old, whatever, they still have the tic that they got when they were young. It does come and go. It is affected by stress, but not caused by stress. So just like your stomach problems or your headache problems or whatever it is, or your backache problems are worsened through stress, they may actually be caused by something else, not just stress. So every condition we have is aggravated by stress, and tics tend to show up more when we're stressed. But interestingly, they also show up when we're relaxed. So like a child may not be ticking so much at school as he is at home. When he comes home, it's almost like the body explodes in the tics. Yeah. Now, tics can be minor. It can be just a little, like we said, a little nose wrinkle, a little mouth movement, or a little shoulder thing, and really not bother anybody ever. Or they can be complex, where they're actual movements. There are kids who reach out to touch other people's bodies. There are kids who reach out to grab other people's genitals. There are all sorts of complex movements that can be tic disorders. There are even mental tics that we used to think were pure OCD. There's a type of OCD which is just obsessional, but there's actually a tic type of process that goes on that is not the same. The movements we see a person making may be a tic, or they may actually be something closer to a nervous habit, from, let's say, an ADHD person just has a lot of energy in their system who's just moving excessively. They could also be, what you're looking at might be OCD. because we don't know why the person's making that movement. And in order to get the proper diagnosis for what it is you're looking at, honestly, you need to see somebody who is very familiar with tic disorders, usually a neurologist, a psychoneurologist, a neuropsychiatrist. Even your average pediatrician, psychologist, or doctor may not be able to identify what is actually going on. And I do point that out in the book, that if you really want a diagnosis, you go to the right person for this. Now, once you get to the right person, they'll tell you what it is. But unless it's severe, they're not likely right now to recommend treatment, because the treatment, there's two types of treatment to help tics. One is one that kind of covers up the look of a disruptive tic, so it's not so socially inappropriate, so that the person will have less negative impact of the tic on his life. And so somebody who's not having any negative impact will not usually receive this as a recommendation. If the tic doesn't bother you, it doesn't bother anybody else, you don't need any treatment for it. But if it does bother you and it's causing social impairment, you may want to do a behavioral intervention for it, which usually you have to find a specialist who is actually trained in that. And that will cost money, and that will be a little bit arduous. It requires a lot of work. But it's definitely worth it if you have a tic that is disruptive in your life. And it doesn't cure the tic. It just moves the tic into a better look.
Now, first of all, tics are on a spectrum. So like you said, many of them are on the milder end that don't impair function. I do recommend going to the pediatrician as a pediatrician first, because the initial approach will be reassurance and the watch and wait for many of these kids. And again, it's a personal decision about how you interpret even the so-called minor tics. For many, many families, the reassurance and, explaining to them nobody should tell them to stop, it's okay, can be so helpful. It may be all that they need, even if the tics persist. That's number one. Number two, tics are highly associated with those disorders you mentioned. So it's not necessarily either or. ADHD, OCD.
Oh, it's definitely not either or. Actually.
Yeah, and tics is
80% of people who have tics have one of these other conditions.
Right. I've heard it called the Tourette's trifecta when you have ADHD, OCD, and Tourette's together. They very.
I've heard actually there's a great book called, they named it Tourette spectrum disorder, which really covers all of it. It's really
Exactly. Great. Exactly. So it is a huge spectrum. And for people who are already distressed by the tics, I do think it is a good idea to see a neurologist, but I wouldn't rush to see one just because you have some, tics.
This assumes that you know that it's a tic. That's what I'm saying. To find out if it's a tic,
I don't think you need a specialist to diagnose tics. I think any pediatrician should be able to diagnose tics.
Okay,
and I don't know how it is where you are, but where we are, there's often a 9 or 12-month wait just to see a neurologist.
Well, this is the thing. You can make that appointment, and then if the tics go away, you don't need that appointment. You can cancel it. And you can go with what the pediatrician says. But I've had people come to me to tell me that their pediatrician told them that it was the cough, the sound was post-nasal drip. It's been going on for a year. I'm just saying, and so but anyways, it doesn't matter. If it's a minor thing, like you said, and they hit the right person and the person says it's likely to go away by itself and that works, then we're done. We're done with treatment. That's it. So that's a good first intervention. The reason I wrote this book is some people want to get rid of the tic. So not everybody's okay with it'll go away soon. Even if it's just a minor thing.
It's personal.
This kid came recently who was a 12-year-old who was making a little squeaking sound. A popular kid socially, and was actually interfering with her confidence. She just didn't she couldn't stop it, and she knew she was being weird. And she's a very cool kid, not the type to be weird. So she didn't want to get rid of it. She didn't want to wait and see how long it took. And so the book will help people who want to give it a try. No promises, but it does help a lot of people who give it a try. So you can give it a try. Okay, if it works, it works. If it doesn't, there are, we started off. We said there's other things you can do, behavioral interventions, and then there's medicines, and even all the way up, in the extreme cases, surgeries and things. So that's not my department at all. But you're asking me about the book called No More Tics. It really addresses especially these early tics, if it does bother somebody, but it will work for more severe tics, long-lasting tics, and so on. it will help even those. In some cases, I can't say who and when and what. It's to say it's worth a try. It's a cheap and harmless intervention, easy. It's not like surgery. It's not like medicine. It doesn't have big side effects. It's nothing. It's just the same as rescue remedy, except that it's finely attuned to the individual taking it. It's made from the same types of ingredients, flower essence things. And don't even ask me, why does this work? Because
right, but you're talking about another, it's a very specific BACH flower remedy cure.
Yes, yeah. It's using the Bach flower remedies, yeah.
Right. I would underscore that the interpretation of the tics can come from the people around the child or the child themselves or both. And I do think it's important for the family to be supportive and not to create anxiety or a negative interpretation of it. I wouldn't, if the parent is saying, I really want to try this remedy because it bothers me so much that my child has the tic, but it doesn't bother the child, then maybe the answer is for it not to bother the parent.
It's interesting. One mother who did use the remedy for her kid, she had a kid in her carpool who was making a lot of noise with a tic, a lot of noise. And she could see that the other kids were sometimes mocking the kid, imitating him and so on. And she felt really bad for that kid. So she mentioned the remedy idea to the mother of that kid. And the mother said, no, I'm not interested in that. He's fine. But the lady who's driving carpools could see, actually, no, he's not fine. He's not fine. Poor kid is being taunted and bothered and so on. So maybe this was a kid who didn't say to his mother, Mom, do you have any good ideas for me about what I can do? But some kids actually say that. Like there's a mother who told me that, well, her kid had a painful, because some tics can actually be painful, but this was a little painful to this child who was like nodding and nodding and nodding and couldn't stop. Mommy, what can we do about this? So sometimes it is coming from the kid, but sometimes the kid has no idea and would never indicate to the parent because nobody knows that there's something that could be done. And that's a big part of why I put the book out. Like, if you don't know that there's any possibility of doing anything, so it's like we don't ask for pain relievers if we don't know that pain relievers exist. So
right,
it's just to put it out there that this can help some people sometimes.
Right, and I warned you I was going to be a devil's advocate here.
I see the little horns. Go ahead.
So first of all, one concern I have is that, just to be very, very clear, Bach flower remedies are not evidence-based. There is no double-blind placebo-controlled studies showing any efficacy. And I, as a Western medicine physician, will not be prescribing them. I won't. Now, if someone said to me, hey, how about that? I would be very supportive. And I might even tell them about it, but with the caveat that it is not evidence-based. I don't want to mislead anybody.
It's definitely not evidence-based, and we're not pretending it is.
Right.
It's something you can buy off the shelf yourself.
Right.
You don't need to be prescribed it.
Right.
It's up to you whether you want to look at that.
Right. Right. And I think it's very reasonable to do that, especially like you said, there aren't necessarily easily accessible and super effective treatments for the wide range of tic disorders. So it is perfectly reasonable. My
competition is low. Yeah.
Right. My approach would be, while you're waiting to see the neurologist, if you would like to try this, I think it's worth a shot, but my concern would be, say, for this family where the mother doesn't have a problem and the child doesn't have a problem, but everybody else has a problem, maybe then that's their problem. In other words,
I don't know who else.
Growing movement about neurodiversity. Say this family does do this and it doesn't work and there's nothing they can do. Why shouldn't everybody be more tolerant? We should be more tolerant about differences in general. So that's a separate approach.
Okay, so I didn't write the book to educate the world about how to treat people. It's just if you have a tic, you want to get rid of it.
I'm saying this. I'm saying this because I'm a big believer in the neurodiversity movement and accepting people where they are and not,
Unfortunately, when it comes to tics, we have to do that because this is not the only thing that may or may not help. All the treatments, right up to the most intensive treatments for tics, may or may not help.
Right, including the Bach flower remedies. I mean, we don't have data, so we can't say.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, they may or may not help. So we're going to have to be nice to people who have neurodiverse issues, of course.
Exactly.
But the angle on this is completely different. It's just like, look, do you want to try this? Because I like your approach. While you're waiting for your appointment, that might take 9 months to come. Do you want to try this? Because, it might help. So, yeah. And people are always surprised and shocked and delighted when it does help, as I am every time it helps. I go like, wow, it really helped. I'm always surprised because it doesn't make any sense to me that it should help, but it does. And that's it. It's going to help some people. I know it's going to help some people, and therefore.
Before I get back to comments on that, because I do, and I do agree with you, by the way, after I've been the devil's advocate for a few minutes, I do. But one other point I want to make is when it comes to TikTok tics, which you mentioned in there as well, we don't know for sure, and I don't want to be dismissive or say across the board they always are something called a functional neurologic disorder. But they can come from a different place, and it can
actually, I'm glad you mentioned that. Yeah,
psychological problems, right? So again, I do not believe that you should just do one thing. I think that you should seek out professional help. I do think that pediatricians should be more aware of these things. If they're not, you are your child's best advocate, and seek someone else. Don't just try to do this on your own for prolonged periods of time, because tics do wax and wane, and particularly say for a child who has a TikTok tic or a functional neurologic disorder, that tic may be trying to say something that the child can't articulate, and just doing some kind of a remedy may not be getting to the bottom of what's triggering it. So that might be a child who needs mental health.
Yeah, and I take that view with everything. For example, if somebody is anxious or depressed or stressed, any single intervention, including psychotherapy, is not enough. Like I said, we need a full range, mind, body. We need a lifestyle change. We need behavioral change. We need cognitive change, physiological support, possibly nutritional stuff. Like everything matters, So, and everything that we can reach for. I wish, I know like this Trudy Scott, that's somebody you might be interested in. She's a person who has her book is called the Anti-Anxiety Food Book, I believe it is. It's a whole work through the gut and, change. But there's so many roads in. Anything that we can keep learning and trying. But you're right. It's never going to be like, oh, I just did this and it went away. My life is all better. I took this drop and wow.
Magic cure.
Everything's
magic cure.
Now. Yeah, but about that functional neurological disorder, TikTok tics, that has a whole different profile. So it does, instead of starting when the kids are young, 6, 7 or whatever, it starts in adolescence typically, and it affects more girls than boys, which is not like the regular tics. It's not associated with the learning disabilities, autistic, ADHD, OCD, spectrum disorders. It's a whole different story about how that comes on. And but the tics can be very real and just as disturbing to a person who has them. Now, some in the culture people may not be bothered by their tics. It may be even a badge of honor, just like there's lots of different things that people can have that don't bother them. Then if they don't bother you, don't get treatment, okay? If it bothers you, here's something you can try. And Bach flowers would be a very good fit for somebody whose main reason is psychological stress, which they saw such a rise in tic disorders from the pandemic. And don't tell me that's a coincidence, like maybe it's from the vaccines. No, I don't think so, right? It's from the stress of lockdowns, not seeing your friends, being isolated, not living a normal life, and all that brought. So there was a lot of mental health disorders, including tics, that went on the rise. So for that reason, something like the remedies, which are targeted towards the emotional state, might be very helpful. Try it. Doesn't work. There's a few dollars down the drain. Nothing bad happened.
But keep those antennas up for mental health issues. A lot of times in teens, they're internalized and they're often missed by parents. So as a pediatrician who does a lot of mental health, I beg parents to not just do that one thing, but to seek
not only
counseling.
That, but a lot of parents, that's what the word is, discount or diminish the psychological pain that teenagers in because they chalk everything up to hormones or it's just a teenager thing. Yeah. And that's so dismissive. Teenagers should be happy. Teenagers should not be, moody and miserable, depressed or anxious. Those are mental health conditions. All right. So your teenager should be happy. And to say that, it's just a teenager, that is really going to miss the mark. That's not the way it should be at all.
Right. And it's so sad how we don't, I say this over and over for like a broken record, how we don't treat mental health on par with physical health, whether it's with the insurance here, it's not covered the same way, whether it's some kind of shame or some kind of pull yourself up by your bootstraps. But teens today, post-pandemic, the majority are having significant actual disorder level anxiety and depression. It's horrible.
That's something, Yeah.
It's horrible and it needs to be addressed. And I really want parents to understand that and to have a very low threshold for an evaluation. And again, pediatricians should be picking up, the gap in care. Some are, some aren't. I encourage those who are listening to please seek out support for that, because I think we all have to help in this crisis and not just, wait for the people to be on a waiting list for, a therapist or mental health professional. Well, we don't have time for, because I know it's Erev Shabbos, but I just want to allude to the book you told me about, The Magic Feather Effect by Melanie Warner. And when you talk about a lot of the things you talk about, a lot of those outside helpers, I do think we're too dismissive of placebo. And that is a whole rabbit hole we just don't have time to go down, but people should really read The Magic Feather Effect and understand. And I just want to read what she says at the very, very end of the book. She says, let me find the line. This is a doctor, Yale gastroenterologist Howard Spiro, who says, "We physicians must be humble before our ignorance of how one person can relieve the suffering of another." And so that humility and that curiosity, I think physicians should have. And I am so impressed and so honored to be interviewing you. I'm so impressed by your integrative approach where you bring a huge toolbox, including the so-called alternative therapies, because what will help people will help people. It's so simple in the end.
Yeah, that's it. Just help us, please. Yeah.
So I want to thank you so much for doing this with me again.
Thank you for having me. Right.
Have a great Shabbos.
You too.
Thanks for listening to the JOMA Preventative Health Podcast. If you've enjoyed this, please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts and share this with your friends. For more information, check out our Instagram at JOMA_org. Check out our website, www.joma.org, that's JOWMA.org, or email us at health@joma.org.